Hotep, how's everybody doing today? Hey, this is Michael M. Hotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. So it is Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. November is just going by quickly. It's been a very, very busy month. Hope everybody's doing well today. Okay, share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. This is going to be a very, very interesting conversation. And if it doesn't apply directly to you, you probably know somebody who this applies to, right? So I've been seeing articles the past few months dealing with African-American student loan debt, okay? Dealing with African-American student loan debt. And most recently, articles came out November 15th. CBSnews.com had an article: "Student loan debt weighs heavier on black borrowers." We saw that MSN.com and other outlets picked up this story, and this is from a report from the Federal Reserve. A few months ago, back in, September 25th, Degrio.com had an article, "African-American college loan debt at an all-time high," and they picked up a story from the Washington Post. Okay, so we're going to deal with some of these, we're going to deal with a number of these articles. And this all ties also into the racial wealth gap, which is historical, okay, legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, redlining when it comes to housing, the different things like this, the GI Bill, a lot of the policies from the New Deal. But also this ties into the wage gap as well, the racial wage gap, okay? And so we're going to talk about all of this. The Black student loan debt is crushing Black borrowers as the racial wage gap plays a big part. Experts say how to fix it, okay? And we see that among some of the presidential candidates, the crushing student loan debt, $1.6 trillion approximately in student loan debt nationwide from about 44 million borrowers. You have certain presidential candidates proposing plans, talking about addressing this. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Bernie Sanders, some others talking about the crushing student loan debt. Well, this really disproportionately impacts African Americans as well. Okay, so we're going to deal with some of this. And all this deals with understanding how politics impacts every aspect of our lives, and politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement, okay? And then also African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. And you can advertise through our live broadcast as well as on our audio podcast. We're on 8 different podcast platforms of our various broadcasts and our Sunday night show, the African History Network show. So email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how to advertise with us, okay? All right, so we've got Sherwin, we've got Deborah, just a few of the people watching. Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. All right, let's go to this. I want to go to this most recent article here because I've been doing a lot of research on this, and I've studied this in the past, but there's some new information that's come out recently. Let's go to this article from CBS.com. And this article is entitled "Student Loan Debt Weighs Heavier on Black Borrowers," Fed says, the Federal Reserve. Student loan debt weighs heavier on Black borrowers, okay? And let's pull this up. I had it up. I don't know what happened to it. So I had to reboot my computer. Things were acting crazy. But the mountain of student loan debt is crushing borrowers across the country, okay? And it's having an even harsher impact on African Americans in places like Brooklyn and Chicago when compared to white borrowers, according to research economists at the Federal Reserve Bank, researchers at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Okay, let me pull this up. Hold on just a second. I had this up and it disappeared. Okay, so part of the problem is that African Americans bring home a relatively lower income. Okay, so we've talked about Black Women's Equal Pay Day. All right, if you missed that video that I did dealing with Black Women's Equal Pay Day a couple of weeks ago, go watch that. We're going to re-air that a few times because that also ties into policy. That ties into a legacy of racism in this country, but it also ties into policies. So part of the problem is that African Americans bring home a relatively lower income and can't devote as much money to payments, student loan payments. The Federal Reserve researcher said. Another factor is that African American college students graduate or sometimes even drop out with a much higher loan bill or student loan bill than members of other racial groups. So Americans hold more than $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. So it's right about 1.6 trillion, according to Federal Reserve data released last week. And this article is from November 15, 2019, November 15, 2019. Now, after sifting through Census Bureau data, Federal Reserve figures and credit info from Equifax, the researchers found that people in higher income neighborhoods in places like Nashville, Tennessee, Boston, Massachusetts, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, are less likely to fall behind on their student loans and to default. People living in lower income areas where there's a higher concentration of African Americans, such as Detroit, Michigan, Washington, D.C., and Newark, New Jersey, tend to have higher student loan balances and are at greater risk of defaulting, they said. Now, borrowing rates are somewhat higher in areas with a majority of African American residents, at 23%. Compared to 17% in Hispanic majority zip codes. Okay, so zip codes that have a majority African American residents, 23% of those residents will borrow using student loans, 17% in Hispanic majority zip codes, and 14% in white majority zip codes. Now, these differences are likely explained in part by income disparities, because I'm going to come to that. Because there are two pieces of legislation that have passed the House of Representatives that are being held up in the Senate, being blocked in the Senate, that could drastically address the income disparity, the income gap, okay? And you have the Paycheck Fairness Act, which passed the House of Representatives in March of 2019, and then you have the raising the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour. Both of those bills have passed the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives, but they're being blocked in the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so the Federal Reserve data show that people living in predominantly African-American areas of the country have an average student loan balance of about $37,000. The average white student's balance is $34,000. African American borrowers are twice as likely at 18% to default on their student loans than whites are at 9%, the data show. Now, African Americans typically holding $37,000 in student loans is particularly troubling because in those communities, African Americans are also reporting that their average annual income is $38,000 a year. Okay, and this is the research from the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So you have African Americans who graduate from a four-year institution, on average, has student loan debt about $37,000. And then African Americans typically holding $37,000 in student loan debt are coming from communities where the average annual income is $38,000 a year. So African Americans across the country are getting crushed by student loan debt. This is less money that we have to invest in businesses, less money we have to invest in the stock market, investments, annuities, 401k plans, less money we have to buy property, less money we have to use as seed money for our children to start businesses. So this has a wide-ranging implication. So the Federal Reserve study is part of a growing body of evidence pointing to disparities in African American and white student lending. Almost 85% of African Americans have student loan debt compared to 69% of white Americans, okay? Almost 85% of African Americans have student loan debt compared to 69% of white Americans, according to North Carolina nonprofit organization, the Center for Responsible Lending, the Center for Responsible Lending. Now, the Brookings Institute reported that 38% of African American students who entered college in 2004 defaulted on their student loans compared to 12% of white students. Now, paying off student loans remains an uphill battle for African Americans because, quote, Black graduates still earn less at their first postgraduate jobs compared to other races, end quote, said Marcus Garrett, who runs a blog and podcast on how to eliminate debt. Okay, now what's interesting is that because I remember when I was going through college, I graduated from Wayne State University here in Detroit. When I was going through college, and you also were in the business school, and they're talking about earning potentials, things like this, right? I don't remember them talking about the disparity in earnings per race. Because when you look at when they show you the range, the earning potential with the various degrees, right? They didn't break it down by race and say if you're African American male, you're going to make 79 cents on the dollar. If you're African American female, you're going to make 63 cents or 67 cents, whatever it was back then. All right. When we look at Black Women's Equal Pay Day, and I talked about this Sunday night on my show. I also did I guess it was an hour, almost 2-hour broadcast dealing with it here on Facebook and YouTube. We see that the average African American woman makes 61 cents for every dollar that the average white male makes. Okay, it takes the average African American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male makes in 12 months. All right, so when I was in college, that discrepancy was not taught to us. Okay, now I don't know if they're exactly teaching that to them today in college. All right, now I know when I was working with the local community college here with their No Worker Left Behind program that then Governor Jennifer Granholm initiated to retrain Michigan's workforce. Okay, because we had a lot of people being laid off we had a lot of people taking buyouts from the auto industry. All right. And so now you have people 48, 50, 55 years old, and they need retraining. Okay. They're too young to just retire, but they need retraining into fields that are in demand. Okay. So, I'm working with a local community college, and we're getting people enrolled in college through the No Worker Left Behind program. And we're looking at different programs where you either get a 2-year associate's degree or you get a certificate, okay? Because a lot of professions now, you don't have to have a 2-year associate's degree, or you may not even need a 4-year degree. You just may need a 18-month, 12-month certificate to actually get into that field. Well, when they're showing the earning potential, right, in the collateral that we have, it's not broken down by race. It's not saying if you're a white male, you're going to make this amount on average. If you're African-American female, African-American male, you're going to make this amount. It wasn't broken down by race. But what happens is when you So what I think is that if it's going to be broken down by rate, if you're African American and you're going to make less, right? When you get the same education, then I think your credit hours should be adjusted. The cost of your credit hours should be adjusted, and you should have to pay less, right? So if African American women are going to make 61 cents for every dollar that the average white male makes, then their credit hours should be 61% of what the average white male pays. I mean, because what happens is they have to pay back the student loan debt, and they're paying back the full amount of the credit hours. But your earning is a percentage of what the average white male makes. So a lot of these things are not told to us when we go and get student loans because we're trying to better ourselves. We want a career. We need some type of education, things like this. A lot of this is not explained to us. And another thing is, unfortunately, a lot of our people are majoring in the wrong thing as well. Okay, a lot of our people are majoring in the wrong thing. How you doing? Let's see, Sherwin, Deborah, Ashley, Mosey. How's everybody doing? Shannon. Okay. See, a lot of the other thing is a lot of African Americans are majoring in the wrong fields. College is not bad. Is that many people are not using college strategically. Okay. I encourage parents and students, because I would talk to parents also, and we will hold recruiting sessions. And one of the things that we encourage people to do when you fill out the FAFSA form, see, a lot of people we were dealing with qualify for Pell Grants. Okay, Pell Grants you don't have to pay back. Okay, Pell Grants come from the Department of Education. So you fill out the FAFSA form. Pell Grants you don't have to pay back. Okay, you have to fall within a certain income range to qualify for Pell Grants. Student loans you have to pay back plus interest. Okay, interest you have the federal guaranteed student loans through the Department of Education, through the federal government. Then you have private loans, private student loans from banks, credit unions, things like that. Those interest rates are usually higher than the interest rates from the guaranteed student loans from the federal government. But I encourage people to go to BLS.gov. BLS.gov is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Okay, BLS.gov. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics has what's called the Occupational Handbook. We'll post the link here, BLS.gov. Okay, they have what's called the Occupational Handbook. The Occupational Handbook, most people don't even know this exists. What it does is it shows different occupations. It shows what the demand for this particular job will be, for this particular field would be for the next 10, 15, maybe 20 years. It shows you what type of credentials, what type of education you need, whether you need a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, certificates, certifications. It shows you what type of education you need. And it also, if I remember correctly, it shows you the earning potential as well. This is the Occupational Handbook at BLS.gov, Occupational Handbook at BLS.gov, okay? So most people don't even know this exists. So, students will major in things that they like, but don't really research what is the demand for this field? What's the earning potential in this field? Is this field going to allow me to make the type of money that I want to make, to live the type of lifestyle that I want to live? Okay, a lot of times there's this mismatch. So they'll major in things that they like, and then there's no real demand for this occupation, and then they're saddled with student loan debt, and then they end up getting a job oftentimes that doesn't allow them to pay back the loans, or it may be a job that doesn't have anything to do with what their degree is in. Okay, this is another problem. So college is not bad. Is that a lot of people go into it, don't have a proper strategy, don't really understand how to use college. The other thing is that the STEM fields are hot. Okay, there are about 4 million. So a couple years ago, I did a story on 910 AM, the Superstation, WFDF, the radio station I do radio on here in Detroit. and I did it on my show, the African History Network show, as well as Wake Up with Steve Hood, the morning show, when I used to be on the morning show here in Detroit. And there was a campaign that Verizon had called We Need More, okay? We Need More. And they aired this during the NCAA during the NCAA Sweet 16. Let's see here. Let's pull up this article. LeBron James and Adriana Lima tell kids to be scientists, not celebrities, in Verizon spot. So this was in March 31st, 2017. Verizon had this whole campaign called #WeNeedMore. And it's talking about we don't need more athletes, we need more scientists, okay? And when you research this, one of the things they talk about, there's a commercial, okay? And one of the things they talk about is that there are 4 million available jobs right now in the STEM fields, 4 million available jobs right now in the STEM fields. Okay, looks like they restricted this and you got to pay money to read this damn article. Okay, let's try to go in the back way. Let's see if we can go in the back door and do this another way, because before you didn't have to do this. This is the article I have bookmarked, but there are other articles that talk about this. Okay, so let's look at this. Is from adweek.com. Adweek, you know, I used to read Adweek and Advertising Age because I have a background in marketing. My degree's in marketing, so I was reading them in college. Okay, so I went in the back doorway and now I can read it. Okay, so if you haven't figured this out, this is something I figured out. Nobody told me this, right? Sometimes I don't recommend this, but in a case like this, I have to get the information. If you go to a website and they have the article restricted, so you have to pay money to read the article. A backdoor way to get into it, not that I recommend this, a backdoor way to get into it is to copy the name of the article and put it into the Google search and Google it and pull it up through Google. And a lot of times you can go in that backdoor way. Okay, not that I recommend this, okay? I don't recommend you do this, but hey, you know, I had to get the information to you. All right, so, but the hashtag We Need More project, what it did was they had commercials, and they showed what the average earnings were like in all these different fields. Okay, in this article here, it has the commercial as well. Okay. But it talks about how millions of young Americans want nothing more than to be the next LeBron James. But this is when he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers, that losing team owned by Dan Gilbert. I'm glad he left Dan Gilbert's ass. Dan Gilbert is a big Donald Trump supporter. He also owns Quicken Loans. He donated $750,000 to Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. So the hell with Dan Gilbert. But the Cavs forward and frequent pitch man has a different message for kids. The world doesn't really need more basketball stars. Drew Brees of the New Orleans Saints quarterback and Adriana Lima posit that the world doesn't really need more quarterbacks or supermodels either. What does the world need more of then? The answer, according to a new Verizon campaign set to launch during the first round of the Final Four this weekend, is more scientists, more engineers, more mathematicians, and more tech professionals, all right? I mean, when I saw this commercial, man, this thing made me want to go back to school. I'm looking at the earning potentials. I was like, God damn. Okay. I'm looking at the type of money you can make. The purpose of the campaign created by Verizon's digital agency partner, RGA, is to highlight the telecom giant's innovative learning initiative, which funds STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math education programs at schools throughout the U.S. All right. Let me see something here. So let me see if I can look at this and mute the. Let me see if I can look at this. I want to get because they show some of the fields, and I had some more information on this. because I looked at some different information. I looked at some of the fields they were talking about, and I went to Verizon's Innovative Learning website. Also, they have the link in here as well for it. So things that they show: zoologists, about $97,000 a year; food scientists, $113,000 a year; animator, $113,000; astronaut, $100,000 a year. What is this? Let's see, nurse practitioner, environmental engineer. Let me back this up again, because they show some of the okay, GIF creator, GIF, GIF, like the GIFs that on social media, and it's like 3-4 seconds, and it's a little picture that moves. GIF creator, $168,000 a year. Cartoon animator. They have a marine engineer, spacecraft engineer, playground architect. They have all different types of fields, all different types of professions, careers in the STEM fields. And these are a lot of things that in general we're not directed towards. We don't even know that exist. All these type of opportunities, and you can make more money in this field over the next 10, 15, 20 years than the average athlete can. Okay? Because the average career in the NFL is about 3.6, 3.7 seasons coming from the NFL Player Association. Average career in the NBA is 5 seasons. Okay? With these type of fields, you can basically write your own ticket. So I'm going to post this link here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull up the video from YouTube. We'll post a link from YouTube. I want you to watch this, show this to your children, okay? Because these type of professions, jet pilot, 3D, what is this? 3D, like 3D animator, skyscraper architect, 3D modeler, $100,000 a year. Jet pilot, $187,000 a year. UX designer, $113,000 a year. Therapist, $114,000 a year. Okay, this is mind-boggling. Okay, but a lot of our people don't know this, so we'll go major in psychology. Not knocking psychologists. We need psychologists, but to do something with psychology, to do something in psychology, you really need, from my understanding, you really need a PhD in psychology. Okay, but we'll go major in things that are not in demand and don't generate the type of income that we want to live the type of lifestyle that we want. All right. And then the other thing is, there's a whole lot of PhDs. It's a lot of PhDs that teach at colleges. They're adjunct professors, and they're broke, because I've seen articles that talk about adjunct professors who have PhDs and they're getting food stamps. They're living in poverty. Okay, so we posted that here. Verizon Innovative Learning, we need more. Verizon Innovative Learning, we need more. GIF over 100,000. Well, I think these are starting salaries. Ashley, this is GIF. It's I think GIF animator. Okay, so I think these are starting salaries. All right, and also this is on Verizon's YouTube channel, Verizon Innovative Learning, hashtag we need more. And then I'm going to give you the article here from, this is the one from Adweek, okay? And then there's another one also from, okay, there's another one also from Advertising Age as well. There's another one also from Advertising Age. Okay, so we'll pull this up. Just a second. Somebody's sending me a message. I hate when people send me messages and I'm on live. All right. Let me give you this link here as well. In the name of this article here from Advertising Week, LeBron James and Adriana Lima tell kids to be scientists, not celebrities in Verizon spot. Okay. I mean, so there are all types of fields out there. And you know, what's interesting, I just watched the episode of Mixed-ish, right? On ABC, comes on before Blackish. And in this episode, Rainbow, who's Tracy Ellis Ross when she's a little girl, just so it's, you know, if you haven't seen the show, you have to see it to understand what it is. But Rainbow, it likes science, right? She's a 12-year-old mixed, you know, African-American white girl, biracial. She likes science. And she gets, you know, 105% on her science tests. She gets extra credit. And the other girls in her class are dumbing themselves down so they are popular with boys. And she feels the pressure to not pursue science. So later in life, you know, she becomes a doctor. So if you watch Blackish, right, that's about Tracy Ellis Ross and her husband, Anthony Anderson, as adults. Mixed-ish is about when she was a little girl adjusting to being mixed race. So she ends up becoming a doctor. So she at the end embraces science. But it's interesting to see how there's oftentimes pressure on girls, especially African-American girls in many instances, to dumb themselves down when it comes to science, not be interested in science so they could be more appealing to boys and not make boys feel inferior if the girls are superior when it comes to science. Okay, so this other article from Advertising Age is we don't need more LeBrons, says LeBron in Verizon's ad. We don't need more LeBrons, says LeBron in Verizon's latest spot. Okay, campaign encourages kids to become science and tech workers instead. All right, so let me bookmark this also. So watch this one. It has a video in there as well. Okay, and something like this can really literally change your child's trajectory, change what they decide that they want to major in. So college is not bad. It's how you use it, is what you major in. Okay. And the other thing is, a lot of people think that if you are an ex-offender, if you're a returning citizen, you have a criminal record, you can't get financial aid. That's not true. I've helped ex-offenders get financial aid. Pell Grants, not student loans, we got them Pell Grants. Why is this? Okay. One, so last time I looked at the FAFSA form, is question number 23. I actually wrote an article about this a few years ago because I heard people just talking this nonsense once again. Like people talk this BS about the Harriet movie, don't know what they're talking about. Go watch the November 3rd, 2019 episode of the African History Network show, where myself and historian Jamon Jordan break down the film, separate fact from fiction, and I provide you a lot of historical information about Harriet Tubman, okay? So we'll post the link here also. It's on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep. And we provide evidence to back up what we're talking about, okay? Because unfortunately, a lot of people putting a bunch of nonsense out here, don't know what they're talking about, don't provide evidence. But question number 23 on the FAFSA form asks something to the effect of, have you ever been convicted of a felony? All right. Then it goes on to ask, when you were convicted of a felony, was this during a period of time that you were receiving federal financial aid? Well, for 99% of African Americans who have a felony record, the answer would be no. So, because if you actually read what they're asking, then if your conviction was not during the period of time that you were receiving federal financial aid, then you qualify for federal aid. You have to meet, other requirements, income requirements, things like that. But you qualify. So there were ex-offenders who I personally helped get Pell Grants and got them enrolled in school because they qualify for it. But what happens is a lot of people hear a lot of this BS. One person repeat what the other person said. This is and they go out and operate based upon misinformation. This is why I tell people proper documentation ends all conversation. You don't have to believe a word that I say. Go research this for yourself. This is why I tell people go research things for themselves. I remember I was sitting in, we were doing, so during this whole campaign with No Worker Left Behind, things like this, we are targeting certain segments of the population here in Detroit. So we're dealing with returning citizens. We're dealing with people displaced from the auto industry. We're also working with veterans, okay, veterans from the military, and getting them relevant skills, et cetera. And at Herman Kiefer Hospital, Herman Kiefer, what is that? It was like a medical center, something like that. But here in Detroit, they had a whole floor that had, they promoted it as a returning citizens center, okay? And they had all these agencies that had offices on this one floor targeting returning citizens. So I'm sitting in one of the agency's office that we're working with, and I'm talking to the director, and in walks one of her caseworkers. And she explains, you know, I'm from the college and we're working on getting her clients enrolled in school, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, most of these guys can't get student loans. Okay, well, that's right. Most of these guys can't get financial aid because they have felony records. So, you know, back at that time, most of the FAFSA forms, well, at least a lot of them, this is, I guess, 2005, 2006, something like that. Most of the FAFSA forms, you know, it was a paper form, okay? So I pulled out the paper application and point to question number 23, and I say, read that. He reads it, and he says, oh. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell you mean, oh? You're the caseworker, and you're giving these guys wrong information, and all you have to do is read the damn form. Because when we got these guys enrolled in college, it transformed their lives. I had one who told me, he said, look, I know I messed up. I know I messed up in my life. He said, but you know, he said he got enrolled in school. He was going to church. He was taking classes on, back at that time, I don't know if they still do it, but the community colleges, they started offering classes on Sunday. He said, you know, he was happy. He was majoring in business. Things like this can change people's lives. That one piece of information can totally change somebody's life. But you got people out here putting out misinformation, have no clue what they're talking about. Let me see something here. I want to see if I can pull this up. You may still be able to get you could probably still get a paper application from you may be able to order one because everything's online now. But I was trying to see if I could pull this up here. Okay, so here we go. I went and searched for question number 23. And what I'm going to do, I want to post this link here. This may not apply to you specifically, but you may know somebody this applies to, okay? And when I hear people who have degrees, who are supposed to know better, and they still put this nonsense out here and repeat this nonsense, okay? This is why proper documentation ends all conversation. Okay, so the question is, have you been convicted for the possession or sale of illegal drugs for an offense that occurred while you were receiving federal student aid, grants, work-study funds, and or loans? This is question number 23, okay? The question cannot be left blank. Select no if You never received federal student aid. You never had a conviction for possessing or selling illegal drugs. The conviction was not a state or federal offense. The conviction occurred before you were 18 years of age and you were not tried as an adult. So if it was something when you were 16, 17 years old, you weren't tried as an adult, the answer is no. Select no if the conviction was removed from your record, or select no if the offense that led to your conviction did not occur during a period of enrollment which you were receiving federal student aid, grants, work study funds, or loans. Okay? It tells you right there. But see, a lot of our people just operate based upon misinformation. And this one piece of information right here can totally transform somebody's life. All right. Let me see here. Okay, people send me messages. I'm on live. Okay, let me post this link right here. This is question number 23 from the FAFSA form. Now, if I didn't do the type of work that I did in the past and actually deal with this firsthand, I wouldn't know it unless, I actually read the FAFSA form. Or if I went back and read it, what have you. But because of the work that I did in the past, I know this for a fact. Question 23. Have you been convicted for the possession or sale of illegal drugs for an offense that occurred while you were receiving federal student aid, grants, work study funds, and or loans? So for most of our people, the answer is no. When they were convicted, they weren't receiving federal financial aid. They weren't receiving work study. They weren't getting Pell Grants. They weren't getting loans, which means you're eligible for federal financial aid. So in most of them, they'll qualify for Pell Grants just because of income or lack thereof. They'll qualify for Pell Grants, which is good because Pell Grants you don't pay back. Come on, man. See, we don't understand that we don't understand that we don't understand. All right, let's see. Monk said, I like to try and get ex-offenders to get into the trade schools. It takes less time and money to get into a career. Okay, so the trade schools are good, Monk, but what people have to understand is that community colleges, you can get certificates in the trades, and it's less than 2 years. It could be 18 months, it could be 12 months, it depends. So community colleges offer more than just a 2-year degree. This is what a lot of people don't understand. The other thing is that a lot of schools, and we have schools in Detroit that do this now, you have what's called dual enrollment, because one of the things I did was I went to high schools to recruit students for dual enrollment as well. Dual enrollment is where your child is in high school and they're also taking, like on the weekends or maybe in the evening, but especially on the weekends, they're taking college level courses on the weekends. So various high schools have programs with local community colleges where when your child graduates with their high school diploma, they also graduate with a 2-year associate's degree, which means when they go to a 4-year institution, they most likely would just have to deal with 2 years of school at the university because they already have a 2-year associate's degree. They've knocked out a lot of the prerequisites, okay? Which means that their student loan, which means that their cost of college is going to be much less because now they only have to pay for 2 years as opposed to 4 years. A lot of these dual enrollment programs, it may be either free or it may be at a greatly reduced cost. You want to check with your child's high school, check with their counselors, ask about dual enrollment at local community colleges, pursue that. A lot of our people don't know that something like this exists, okay? But these are all opportunities out here. All right, Shanika said I was just telling my son this, okay? These are all opportunities. These are all strategies. There's so many opportunities out here. But if we just keep thinking we can't do this, I understand white supremacy and racism exists. I understand what it is and how it works. I understand it better than most people, okay? But there's still a whole lot of opportunities out here for us to take advantage of, all right? Success is where preparation meets opportunity. How are you preparing yourself for success? How are you preparing yourself to take advantage of opportunities? What type of information are you consuming on a daily basis? And also, when the information you take in changes and increases, the people around you are going to change. If you can't change the people around you, then change the people around you. Did you know that I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years, right? Did you know that your average annual income, did you know that your annual income is the average of what your 5 closest friends make? Your annual income is usually the average of what your 5 closest friends make. So if you want to make more money, you're going to have to get yourself some new friends, because as the information you take in changes, the people around you change, and what you talk about, the conversation is different. Okay. When I talked to Dave Anderson, who owned the Empowerment Radio Network, that I used to be on for my nationally syndicated radio show when I was doing radio 5 days a week, the Michael Imhotep Show, and I used to guest host Roland Martin's national radio show when he was on the Empowerment Radio Network. When I talked to Dave Anderson, our conversation is totally different, man. We're talking about tax laws. We're talking about tax lien certificates. We're talking about investments. We're talking about a whole host of things. I talked to George Frazier. Okay, I talked to Michael Roberts. Okay, Michael Roberts, because we're all in the Black Friday series, Black Friday documentaries from director Rick Mathis. When I talked to George Frazier, talked to Michael Roberts, who's a multi-millionaire. Okay, last time, I think he owns maybe about 80 businesses now. When I just saw him about a month or so ago, he couldn't tell me exactly how many businesses he owns. Okay, he owns the Roberts Riverwalk Hotel here in Detroit. All right, when I talk to him, okay, our conversation is entirely different. But that deals with your circumference of awareness. That deals with the type of information you're taking in. Yes, white supremacy and racism exists. So what are we going to do about it? Yeah, people quote Dr. Francis Wilson. I knew Dr. Wilson. I interviewed Dr. Wilson 3 times. I read the ISIS papers. Okay, so now what do we do about it? Okay, so Monk said it's true knowledge is power. That's true. Shanika said he's 12 in 7th grade now. Okay. Yeah, and see, you want to get in 12th grade, get the children involved in STEM. Get them interested in STEM if they have an interest in that. Okay, cultivate that interest. Engineering, things like that. We have to expose our children to all these possibilities, because at that age, 12 years old, 11 years old, 10 years old, a lot of African American males especially want to be entertainers. They want to be athletes. They want to be rappers, things like this. Why? Because that's what they see on the television. Those are the images they see on the television. So their opportunities, they feel, are limited. They're picking from the opportunities that they see. Now, if they have a parent who's an engineer, they have a parent who's a doctor, they have a parent who's an attorney, okay, they have a parent who's a 3D animator, they have a parent who's a zoologist, okay, their circumference of awareness most likely will be much larger than somebody else whose parents may work, not demeaning this, but just, may work in a factory and they want to be an athlete. The child wants to be an athlete because they see a lack of opportunities, all right? Okay, so let me see here. All right, everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. And then also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so we have some new advertisers and some returning advertisers. Email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want to advertise with the African History Network. Now, a lot of people are looking at investing. A lot of people are talking more about investing. We know the new year is coming up as well. This is going to be some people's New Year's resolution. Well, the ProfitRoom.com is a stock market trading and education company that has mentorship programs that are designed for beginners just like yourself. They teach individuals how to create generational wealth through trading and investing in the financial markets. They teach about the stock markets, options, futures, foreign exchange markets, also called Forex. Their specialty is day trading, and providing one-on-one mentorship. Now, you may have seen the article recently from blacknews.com about the Profit Room, entitled "The First Black-Owned Day Trading Company of Its Kind is Teaching Courses on How to Profit from the Stock Market." So visit their website, theprofitroom.com for more information. They also have classes that they provide as well. And let them know that you found out about this from the African History Network. Latoya and Ernest at the Profit Room would definitely like to hear from you. Okay, African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Our current promotion, get 3 months for the price of one. This is going on for a few more days. We have a few more slots still available for advertisers, and we can get you up and running today. Okay, so let's go back to this article and let's see who we have here. We got Gigi. How you doing, Gigi? We got Ashley. All right. Ashley said, Imhotep straight thugging these articles. Okay, I never heard anybody express it like that before, but okay. I'm a knowledge gangster. Is that what you're trying to say? All right. Let's see here. We've got 33 Harris. I am in debt with 2 Parent Plus and my own. Okay. Let's see. Who else we have? Lakeisha. How to cultivate STEM. My son is doing a magnet middle school. He's good, but I'm not sure where to go from there. Okay, check out the articles that I posted dealing with Verizon We Need More project. You can start there. Also, do they have counselors at your son's school? What have you? Usually in middle school, the language arts teachers, at least when I was in middle school, and I'm talking about 30 years ago, but when I was in middle school, the language arts teachers were the teachers that we spent the most time with. So talk to the language arts teachers, talk to their principal, okay? All right, let's continue. Let's go back to this article from CBSNews.com. All right, so paying off student loans remains an uphill battle for African Americans. This also ties into your credit rating as well, okay, if you default on the student loan. Okay, so paying off student loans remains an uphill battle for African Americans because, quote, Black graduates still earn less at their first postgraduate jobs compared to other races, end quote, said Marcus Garrett, who runs a blog and podcast on how to eliminate debt. He said typically African American households have less median household income, which is true. Therefore, the children of these households would theoretically need to take on more student loan debt. Okay, so you take on more student loan debt, you have less median household income. Now, median is a statistical measure where 50% of the population is above that point, 50% is below that point. Also, you're dealing with the racial wealth gap. When we look at the racial wealth gap, we see that a white household, based upon 2016 numbers, a white household has $171,000 in wealth. That's the median household net worth of a white household, $171,000, compared to $17,100 median household net worth for an African American household. All right. So because that in general, African American households have less wealth and less resources to draw on to pay for college, then our students, if they don't qualify for Pell Grants because their parents make too much money, okay, they make too much money for Pell Grants, but not enough money to just really pay for college and then not hurt them, all right, then they're forced to take out student loans. But still, once again, there's strategies that could be implemented to reduce your the amount that you have to pay in general for college. Another thing that can reduce college costs is going to an in-state institution or a commuter college than going away to school and staying in the dorm. Now, I know staying in the dorm is part of the college experience, but if you can save tens of thousands of dollars staying at home and going to a commuter school, you know, maybe your junior year, senior year in high school, you can get a roommate and y'all can get an apartment on, off campus, whatever. But but in general, going to an in-state institution, especially a commuter school in general, can be a lot cheaper than going away to school, paying the out-of-state tuition rate and paying to stay on campus, etc. Okay, so there are different strategies. College is not bad. It's the way that people go about it. The other thing is the skilled trades for some people can be a good option. College is not, college is, even though we created institutions of higher learning and the whole concept of the liberal arts comes from the Per Ankh, the temples of learning in ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, okay? And the whole concept of the liberal arts comes from that, the logic, the rhetoric, the arithmetic, all of that. If you read Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, he breaks this down. Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy, right? But the other thing is that everybody at age 18 or 19 may not be ready for college. They may not have the discipline for college, especially a traditional four-year institution. So trade school, if they have more of an interest in the trades, that may be a better option. A community college where they get a 12-month, 16-month, 18-month certificate may be a better option. All right, there are different strategies to implement. It's not just one size fits all. Okay, so I gave you question number 23 from the FAFSA form. Have you been convicted for the possession or sale of illegal drugs? Okay, so we gave you that. And then, okay, let's go back to this article from cbsnews.com because I have some other articles to get through. Okay, let's go back to this one here. Okay, so eliminating student loan debt has been a major debate topic among Democratic presidential hopefuls. Now, I haven't heard Donald Trump talk about eliminating student loan debt, nothing of any significance, okay? And remember, Donald Trump ran a fake university called Trump University. He had to pay a $24 million fine plus a $24 million settlement plus a $1 million fine for running a fake university, a for-profit college called Trump University. So we see Senator Elizabeth Warren earlier this year announced a plan that cancels up to $50,000 in debt for 42 million borrowers. Senator Bernie Sanders in June introduced a bill that would eliminate all student loan debt, okay? Now just keep in mind when they're making all these promises, okay? Just keep in mind that has to pass the US Senate. That has to pass the US Senate. And you're going to need some Republicans to vote for it because it'll probably need 60 votes and not 51 votes in the Senate. So even if Democrats take back control of the U.S. Senate, which I hope they do, because a lot of these bills you can't get passed in the Senate. The Democrats in the House of Representatives have passed about 300 pieces of legislation since January 3rd, 2019. If you go to govtrack.us, G-O-V-T-R-A-C-K, govtrack.us, that's how you can keep track of all these bills and who sponsors them, what the bill is about, where the bill is in the process. Most of these bills, when they pass the House of Representatives, they die in the Senate because they're being blocked by Moscow Mitch, son of a Mitch, Senator Mitch McConnell, and Republicans in the Senate who control the Senate. And their number one goal in the Senate is to confirm these unqualified federal judges. Okay, so as of November 1st, 2019, Donald Trump, with the help of his henchmen in the Republicans in the U.S. Senate, led by Moscow Mitch, Senator Mitch McConnell, have confirmed 157 federal judges, 157. And most of these are very young, ultra-conservative white males, some ultra-conservative white females. Many of them totally unqualified to be federal judges. They just confirmed one in the last 1 to 2 weeks. He's 37 years old, if I remember correctly. He's never tried a case before. The American Bar Association came out and said this person is totally unqualified to be a federal judge. This is a lifetime appointment. This is a lifetime appointment. We don't understand how elections have consequences. Many of us don't understand that we don't understand. So Marcus Garrett said that the best way to pay down a loan is simply to pay as much as possible, a task he admits is easier said than done. He said it's a catch-22 to try to make additional payments when you're already struggling to just make minimum payments. Yet the main solution to paying off student loan debt beyond lowering the interest rate is to make additional payments above the minimum payment whenever possible. Now, I'm going to post this article here, and I think it was in this article, Financial Tips for Grads. Yeah, it was in this article. They have a video, Financial Tips for College Grads with Debt. And one of the experts was saying that while you're in college, if you can just start paying back $25 a month, that starts to, that will overall reduce how much you will end up paying in the end, okay, because you're dealing with interest and things like this. And also it helps to strengthen the student's credit rating because it shows a history of them paying back the loan as well. Okay, and you know what, while you're in college, of course, you know, you're not obligated to pay back the loan while you're in college. But if you start paying while you're in college, it can reduce overall how much you have to pay and help strengthen your credit rating as well. So there are different strategies. But, you know, average African American, a lot of this stuff we don't know, okay? All right, so let me post this link here as well. This is from CBS.com. And let me get the link here for this article. Yeah, student loan debt weighs heavier on Black borrowers, Fed says. This is from, this is a report from the Federal Reserve of New York. Let's post this link here. Let me go to the next article. How's everybody doing? Anybody watching us at work? I know we're in different time zones as well. Okay, student loan debt weighs heavier on Black borrowers, Fed says. Also, I want to let you know, okay, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network. That really, really helps us out a lot. That helps us to keep broadcasting, helps us to pay the bills, keep doing the research, finance our Sunday night show. So paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Then also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network as well. Our current promotion, get 3 months for the price of 1. And then also we take your 30-second and 60-second audio commercial and put it to the audio podcast of our various broadcasts we do throughout the week, and also our Sunday night show. We're on 8 different podcast platforms. A lot of people don't know this. We're on iTunes, CastBox, Acast, Blog Talk Radio, TuneIn, FM Player. Okay, and then also we promote your business through our Facebook and YouTube videos as well. So email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and we can get you up and running today. All right, so the next article I want to look at here, thegrio.com had an article back from September 22nd, okay? And this one was dealing with African-American college loan debt at an all-time high. African-American college loan debt at an all-time high. They picked up this article from the Washington Post, okay? And I read the Washington Post every day. You all know that, Washington Post, New York Times. And I have a digital subscription to them as well. I pay them each month, so I better read these damn articles. But the article from the Washington Post was, student debt is hitting African Americans the hardest. These experts have a plan to fix it. Student debt is hitting African Americans the hardest. These experts have a plan to fix it. Incidentally, the GRIO, which is African American owned by Byron Allen also. They have an article from November 16th, 2019. Black borrowers are struggling to repay student loan debt. Here's why. And that picked up the article dealing with the Federal Reserve that I talked about from CBS.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you that one as well. They actually mentioned the article from CBS.com. That was one of their sources. All right. So what I do oftentimes, I go read the source articles. Well, actually, most of the time I read the source articles. Actually, it's like 100% of the time I'll go read the source articles. I just don't go read the article that is being, I just don't look at the article from, say, like the GRIO or News One, or even if it's like New York Times, I go read their source articles to make sure that the information that's being reported correlates. Because I've seen instances like with the Root, I had to contact the Root, even though I don't like the Root that much. But it was an article from the Root about Detroit. And it was about an incident actually that happened outside of Detroit, a suburb of Detroit. They're dealing with the police there, and they reported it as Detroit police, even though they cited an article, and the article they cited said it was a suburban city. I had to contact them and say, wait a second, this is not Detroit police. The article you cited is correct. The way you represented the information is wrong. So, I go read those source articles to make sure the information that's being reported by the secondary news source correlates with the primary source. All right. So let's look at this other article here. This is about Washington Post. Where is this one here? Got all this impeachment stuff up. Okay, yeah, student loan debt is hitting African Americans the hardest. These experts have a plan to fix it. Okay, so this is from, what's the date on this? September 20th, 2019. And I saw this article from the GRIO and Washington Post when it came out, but I was so busy, I was in and out of town on the Black Agenda tour, and I just didn't have time to deal with this then. But the statistics are startling. African American college student loan debt. African American college student borrowers more often owe more money and default more frequently than any other racial group on their education loans. The racial disparities in student loan debt are driven by wealth inequality, and lackluster funding of institutions that enroll the highest numbers of African American students, according to the research. Now, concerns about the ways in which African American students shoulder the burden of student loan debt has been propelled onto the national stage during the 2020 Democratic presidential primary race. Several candidates have called for greater funding of historically Black colleges and universities to reduce the need to borrow, while Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts has said her debt cancellation proposal would benefit 80% of African American borrowers. So it's a time, it is a time of big ideas and bold plans, but politicians are not the only ones with these ideas and bold plans. Higher education experts are sharing their own solutions to address the disproportionate impact student debt is having on the African American community. All right. So here are some excerpts of ideas that have been presented. So Jalil Mustafa Bishop is a postdoctoral scholar in the higher education division at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay. And there was also, I want to give you this article here, this other article. I have thousands of articles, y'all know this. I do research all day long. There was an article I saw dealing with skilled trades and opportunities in skilled trades. So I want to give that to you as well. And this is one I saw. We'll pull this up here. I may have to go into my archives and Facebook for this, because you all know that with Facebook, you can archive articles, right? I've got about, I think I'm up to 25,000, something like that, on Facebook. Let me see. Okay, it'll come up here. Let's search for this here. Skilled trade, I think it was. Okay, but let's continue. So Jalil Mustafa Bishop said the problem is that student loans were presented as a false solution for current and future workers enduring racial capitalism, particularly African American people. Student loans were presented as a false solution for current and future workers enduring racial capitalism. He said the idea was that Black workers' elusive quest for higher wages, along with job security and benefits, could be realized if they earned a higher education credential. A credential would finally grant us access to the good jobs. However, this did not work. Okay. African American degree earners, however, are uniquely underpaid, underemployed, and unprotected. The rampant racism across labor markets explains our crisis level student loan outcomes. In an effort to escape bad jobs, African Americans borrow loans at whatever cost to attend colleges, no matter the quality. So one of the traps that many of us fell into were these for-profit colleges. I'm not talking about Trump University, even though I guess maybe some African Americans fell for that con. Hopefully you didn't. But a lot of us, some African Americans trying to better ourselves, we go to for-profit colleges like Corinthian College or ITT Tech. And when you study the Obama administration, President Obama shut down a lot of these for-profit colleges, including Corinthian and ITT Tech, because I remember I used to see commercials for ITT Tech here in Detroit. You may have seen commercials as well. You don't see them anymore. They shut down ITT Tech. What happened was many of these for-profit colleges disproportionately targeted African Americans and Hispanics. They took out commercials on TV shows that we watch, things like this. And then we go in for the meeting with them, or we call them on the phone, and they tell us about all these wonderful programs they have, and they get us to take out these exorbitant student loans. We go through the 12-month, 18-month, 2-year program. We get our certification, certificate, what have you, and then they don't properly place us in jobs that have anything to do with what our training is in. We default on the student loan. We're saddled with this debt. It hurts our credit rating, okay? And we still don't have the job that we went to school for. So these for-profit colleges were getting federal student aid, but not doing their job. So the Obama administration cracked down on them. It put in a lot of regulations on them, shut some of these colleges down, put other colleges on notice. Now, what clueless Betsy DeVos has done with her Secretary of Education is she has rolled back these regulations on for-profit colleges. But keep in mind, she was nominated to be Secretary of Education by a man who ran a for-profit college, Donald John Trump. Okay, then also, they put in, the Obama administration put in student loan forgiveness for people who have been scammed by for-profit colleges. And Betsy DeVos has been dragging her feet on providing the student loan forgiveness as well. Okay, so there are a number of articles being written on this. This is an ongoing story. So Google Betsy DeVos student loan forgiveness. But I saw this article from CNBC.com. The student debt crisis has hit Black students especially hard. CNBC.com. So that's NBC's business channel. And in the article, we'll come back to this, but since we brought up for-profit colleges, they talk about, one of the things they talk about in here is they say to make matters worse, African American students are disproportionately targeted by for-profit colleges, which have come under scrutiny for their high price tags and poor outcomes. More than a quarter of African American students attend these four-year schools compared with 10% of white students, okay? More than 25% of African American students who go to college go to a for-profit college, compared to 10% of white students who attend college go to a for-profit college. They give the example of a man named Sean Joyce, S-H-A-U-N, Sean Joyce. He was at a college fair in Greensboro, North Carolina. And let me pull this article up here because I've got it here. Let's see here. This is CNBC. And okay, impeachment. I've got all these articles up dealing with impeachment. Okay, go check out our Sunday night show, the African History Network show, where I gave a breakdown of week one of the impeachment inquiry. Okay, so to make matters worse, so Sean Joyce was at a college fair in Greensboro, North Carolina, when someone from the Art Institute called him and his mother over to the for-profit school's stand to their display. Now, at the time, Sean Joyce was 17 years old, and he told the man that he was interested in studying video game design. Okay, there are a lot of opportunities in video game design. So he said, quote, "We have that." Sean Joyce decided to attend Art Institute. He said, "I was really excited." Now, at the time, he was 17 years old. He's now 30 years old. He said, quote, "It was a point of pride for me to get a degree," end quote. His mother attended college and planned to study criminal justice, but had to drop out when she became pregnant with him. Without any family savings to draw on, this ties into the income, because we're going to get into, we'll talk some about how the wage disparity in the income gap ties into the wealth gap as well, and makes African Americans more prone to have to take out student loans, okay, especially when they don't understand how to navigate this. But without any family savings to draw on, Sean Joyce took out more than $60,000 in student loans. Like many other former students of the Art Institute, which at one point had some 50 campuses across the country, he said the education there proved a complete disappointment. The education at the Art Institute proved a complete disappointment. He said, quote, "I never actually learned video game design," end quote, Sean Joyce said. Now, you could have gone to a local community college, and you could have, a lot of these community colleges offer degrees in video game design or certificates, things like this. You could have gone to a local community college and spent just a fraction of that money, and you would have had your certification, your degree, what have you, and you could have a job in that field. Okay, because you don't have to learn Shakespeare to do video game design. A lot of these, when you go to a four-year institution, a lot of these prerequisites, okay, maybe for some, things that you do, like when I was in undergrad, okay, a prerequisite to take the lowest level marketing class in the business school was you had to take Psychology 1 and Psychology 2 and Philosophy 1 and Philosophy 2, because you have to understand psychology and philosophy to understand marketing. Marketing deals with understanding the mind and being able to target, to craft messages, to target certain groups of people to elicit a certain behavior. You have to understand how to manipulate the mind, basically, okay? So that's understandable. But if you want to do video game design, you don't have to take Shakespeare. You don't have to read Jane Eyre. So what's happened over the years, they have more concentrated programs for especially people who are non-traditional learners. So it may be people who are adults, they have families, things like this. They may not have 4 years. Okay, they want to go in and get this certification. They have mortgages. They want to go in and get the certification, 12 months, 16 months, 18 months, and they're done. Okay, so today, Sean Joyce works from home, writing recorded phone messages for companies and earns around $30,000 a year. In the meantime, his student loan debt has ballooned to over $100,000. Okay, ballooned to over $100,000. He originally took out more than $60,000 in student loans to go to the Art Institute. Now he owes over $100,000. He has fallen behind on many of the payments, causing his credit score to tank. He doesn't qualify for car loans. Even finding a landlord to rent to him was a struggle. He's 30 years old. Okay, he said, quote, "I'm 30, but my life still feels like I'm 18 because it hasn't been able to move anywhere," end quote, he said. All right. So these are the clip of the expert that I was talking about, who talked about paying back $25 a month. It's in this one here from CNBC.com. They have the video. I'm looking at it now. It's an African-American woman. I forgot her name. Okay. But these for-profit colleges, many of them are predatory. And they had a history of preying and targeting African-Americans and Hispanics. The Obama administration shut a lot of them down and put others on notice. The Trump administration, through Betsy DeVos, has loosened a lot of the regulations and restrictions on them. So read this article. This is an extensive one. This is like 7 pages because I printed up all 7 pages. The student debt crisis has hit Black students especially hard. Here's how. This is from July 27, 2019. So, you know, this is deep. And a lot of our people don't know how to navigate through this. And we'll call the, you know, college that we call the school we see advertised on TV during Maury Povich or Sanford and Son, you know, watching reruns all day. We'll call that school, okay, and don't know we're being swindled. Okay, Todd Reed, how you doing? Keith, let's see, how you doing, Keith? Let's see here. All right, let's continue. Okay, I want to go back to the article from Washington Post. Student debt is hitting African Americans the hardest. These experts have a plan to fix it. Jalil Mustafa Bishop, who's a postdoctoral scholar in the higher education division at the University of Pennsylvania, he said, Black degree earners, however, are uniquely underpaid, underemployed, and unprotected. The rampant racism across labor markets, and where do I have that here? The rampant racism across labor markets explains our crisis level student loan outcomes. Okay, our crisis level student loan outcomes. In an effort to escape bad jobs, African Americans borrow loans at whatever cost to attend colleges, no matter the quality of the college. But what if we focus less on African Americans getting the good jobs and more on turning the bad jobs into good jobs? The bad jobs that pay poverty wages, offer no benefits, and shackle labor rights, all interlocked with racist employment practices. If we remove the labor conditions that make debt desirable for mobility and necessary for survival, then student loans will become obsolete, according to Jalil Mustafa Bishop. And let's see here. Let me, okay, here we go. I'll get it right here. He said, this is a call for legislation to create good jobs, increase the minimum wage to a living wage, federally guarantee employment, provide universal health care, and strengthen workers' organizing power. Strengthen workers' organizing power. That deals with union. Because what right to work laws have done, and last time I checked, there were about 27 states that have right to work laws. Kentucky Kentucky got right to work in, I think it was 2016. Yeah, it was 2016. And what happens is right to work laws came to Michigan. It's either, I think, 2015, something like that. But what right to work laws do is they lower the wages. They've been found to lower wages on average like $3,000 per worker. And they weaken the collective bargaining ability of unions, all right? So if you look at this article from thinkprogress.org, this is from January 2017, January 9th, 2017. Kentucky Republicans assault unions and wages in first act of the year. Kentucky Republicans assault unions and wages in first act of the year. Kentucky is now the country's 27th so-called right-to-work state. So this whole right to work initiative is funded by people like the Koch brothers. Now, when the Koch brothers died, I'm not going to comment on that, okay? But they funded through one of their nonprofit organizations, Americans for Prosperity. And I remember when in Lansing, Michigan, which is the capital of Michigan, so that's the state's capital, I remember people from Americans for Prosperity had tents set up out there on the state capitol grounds, and they're passing out flyers to people trying to convince them that right to work is going to be beneficial for them, right? So in this article here, it says last year, Republican Matt Bevin won the governorship of Kentucky. We know he was just defeated by a Republican. He was just defeated by a Democrat, Governor Matt Bevin of Kentucky. And when you go look at what happened, November 1st through November 2nd, there was a poll taken, and it showed Matt Bevin, the Republican governor, was up 5 points, okay? Then what happened? Dumbass Donald Trump came in and campaigned for Matt Bevin, who was up by 5 points, and Matt Bevin lost by about 5,000 votes. So I hope Donald Trump goes and campaigns for Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, because Mitch McConnell's up for re-election 2020. The election is November 3rd, presidential election, U.S. House of Representatives, all the seats in the House of Representatives. You got about 20 Republican seats up for re-election. I hope Donald Trump goes and campaigns in Kentucky every day until November 3rd on behalf of Senator Moscow Mitch McConnell. So last year, Republican Matt Bevin won the governorship of Kentucky, taking over from Democrat Steve Beshear. Then in November of 2016, Republicans took control of the state legislature after they gained their first majority in Kentucky State House in almost a century. So Republicans gained control of the state legislature, okay, House of Representatives and State Senate, and the governorship. So what was one of the first bills that they signed into law? Right to work. And the very first things the Republican majority did with this power this past weekend, this is when this came out in January 2017, were to pass a so-called right to work law, which will likely weaken unions' finances and repeal a prevailing wage law that ensures government contractors pay decently. Kentucky was the last of the southern states that had not gone right to work, but after Governor Bevin signed the bill on Saturday, it now joins the rest, becoming the 27th state in the country to pass such a law. Right to work laws create what critics call a free rider problem. A free rider problem. Normally, all workers in a unionized workplace must pay dues to the union, given that it's bargaining on given that the union is bargaining on their behalf. But right to work laws allow people to opt out of dues, paying dues to the union, even if they're still being represented by the union, which means they can benefit from union negotiations over wages and working conditions, but don't have to give any money to support these efforts. So right to work is being pushed by corporations, is being pushed by the Koch brothers, things like this. It weakens unions that are negotiating higher wages and better conditions on behalf of some of these same dumbass people that voted for these stupid ass Republicans. And the first thing these Republicans did in Kentucky is to attack some of the very poor Republicans that voted for them in the first place and pass right to work. So when you have somebody like Jalil Mustafa, and so that's 27 states, in as of January 2017. I'm not sure how many it is now. Let me try to pull this up quickly. All right. But see, all this deals with policies. All this deals with laws. A lot of us don't understand how all this impacts us. Okay. Now, this bill don't say Black or African American. It don't say anything like that, but it impacts African Americans. Right to work in Kentucky and all these other 27 states negatively impacts African Americans. So he said, let me go back. Okay. He said, this is a call for legislation to create jobs, increase the minimum wage to a living wage, federally guarantee employment, provide universal health care, and strengthen workers, and strengthen workers' organizing power. That ties right into right to work. As important, we need labor policies that explicitly focus on empowering workers in sectors like caretaking and service work, where African American people are already. So yes, cancel student debt, fund free college, but also make labor anti-racist. Now, if you saw one of my previous broadcasts I did in October, it talked about how over the next 10 years, up to 4.5 million jobs that African Americans hold are going to be eliminated through automation and robotics and software programs. So all of this, and it talked about how African American men are going to be hurt the most because we are in the industries that are going to be affected the most. So all of this comes together. All of this is interrelated, intersects. Black Enterprise had an article about that. Go watch the video I did with that. We'll post the link here when we're done. But it ties into that. And let's see, this is all dealing with Black Women's Equal Pay Day. I've got all these articles. How's everybody doing? Okay, let's see who we have here. We got Keith. Said, I'm from Kentucky and I don't know. Okay, he said, I'm from Kentucky and I don't know one here will debate Mitch. Very red state. Now, doesn't Mitch McConnell have a challenger in Kentucky, Keith? I think Mitch McConnell has a challenger, a Democratic challenger. Let's see here. Who else we have? Okay. Let me try to pull up information on National Right to Work Foundation. Let's look at this. Right to Work States 2019. Yeah, 28 states have right to work. 28 states have right to work according to the upcouncil.com. 28 states have right to work. And what we see is they drive down wages also. They drive down wages, they attack healthcare benefits, all different types of things like that. Okay, they make conditions worse. Right to work laws in general make conditions worse. Okay, so let's look at this. Let's look at this other expert. Ashley Harrington is a senior policy counsel at the Center for Responsible Lending. Ashley Harrington said, to alleviate the Black student debt crisis, we must provide relief to borrowers who are currently struggling under the weight of their student debt, ensure real accountability for for-profit colleges, assure real accountability for for-profit colleges, and support support HBCUs in their mission of educating African American students. This requires broad-based debt cancellation of up to $10,000 for all borrowers in repayment. Okay, I think you're gonna need a lot more than that. Up to 10,000. That's like one semester or 1 year. That's like well, I guess maybe one semester at some colleges, but that's like, you know, That may not even cover a year, some of these institutions now, up to $10,000. Maybe 20 years ago, that would put a significant dent, but a lot of these colleges today, with room and board, things like that, that won't even cover, 10,000 won't even cover a full year. So furthermore, we must drastically streamline income-based repayment options. We must drastically streamline income-based repayment options by collapsing them to include only one plan that calculates payments based on 8% of discretionary income above 250% of the poverty line and has a repayment period of no more than 15 years. These two reforms would immediately allow borrowers to make basic repayments on their loans, but also begin to build long-term financial health. While the reforms would have an incredible impact for all borrowers, African-American borrowers would especially benefit. As she goes on to say, however, given how entrenched the racial wealth gap is, we must go even further in if we plan to truly address the Black student debt crisis and its ramifications. This means a large investment in historically Black colleges and universities as both education providers and economic engines, as well as a concentrated effort to curtail the abuses of the for-profit college industry. So when you go through and read what these experts are saying, and they have a few more I'm going to share with you. This article from WashingtonPost.com, student debt is hitting African Americans the hardest. These experts have a plan, okay? So this article is from, what's the date on this? This is from September 20th, 2019. Some recurring themes that we see from these experts. One, they talk about the income wage gap based upon race. Two, they talk about for-profit colleges, okay? Three, they talk about the racial wealth gap, okay? So these are three constant themes that I see when I look at their responses. Okay, so next expert we have is William A. Darity. William A. Darity, professor of economics at the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity at Duke University, and Fanaba Addo, ADDO, assistant professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And they said, we believe that in order to address the African-American student debt crisis, we need to eliminate racial wealth inequality. To address the African-American student debt crisis, we need to eliminate racial wealth inequality. Why? Because African-American white disparities in student loan debt are deeply rooted in racial wealth disparities. African-American to white disparities in student loan debt are deeply rooted in racial wealth disparities. Lack of resources to pay for college costs means students need to borrow more money, and issues with repayment of debts highlight persistent financial constraints upon leaving school. At the very least, a two-pronged approach is needed to address the Black student debt problem. Okay, a two-pronged approach is needed to address the Black student debt problem at the very least. The first approach will tackle the existing debt overhang that disproportionately burdens African-American young adults. This can be accomplished via a program of student loan forgiveness for all students holding loan debt associated with their college years. Prevention of a renewal of the crisis in the future will require a second, more dramatic approach. We believe what is needed are actionable proposals to eliminate racial wealth inequality. Senator Cory Booker's Opportunity Accounts proposal, or a similar arrangement that provides young adults with an endowment calibrated on the basis of their parents' resources, can help ameliorate the size of the racial wealth gap. However, a reparations program will need to be implemented that brings the African-American share of ownership in the nation's wealth from its current 2.6% to at least 13%. a proportion consistent with the African American share in the nation's population. Okay, so that is Professor William A. Darity and Assistant Professor Fanaba Otto. And once again, this ties into history, ties into the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, redlining. A lot of these, all these policies are coming from, well, a lot of these policies coming from the federal government. Okay, slavery was sanctioned by the federal government, sanctioned in the U.S. Constitution. The foundation for the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, signed into law by President George Washington, and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. The foundation of that is Article 4, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. And even though the international transatlantic slave trade was outlawed March 2nd, 1807 by Congress and goes into effect January 1st, 1808, that is because of Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, but it still allows slavery to exist within the U.S. You can still own enslaved Africans, still sell them, things like this. It outlawed bringing in Africans as slaves, okay? But we know that Europeans still did it, okay? And there were court cases of white men who were caught bringing in Africans into this country between 1808 and 1860 after it was illegal. Okay, read the article from Dr. Jahi Issa and Brother Reggie Marbury dealing with reparations is dead, and what's the name of it? Reparations is dead. Here's how to revive it. This is from 2017. Okay. And a lot of this information I knew before I read the article and interviewed them, but it goes more in depth and it deals with some of these court cases that a lot of people don't know about, you know. And I speak across the country and I ask people, did you know the international transatlantic slave trade was outlawed in 1808? 99% of African Americans don't know this. Reparations is dead, how to resurrect it. Reparations is dead, how to resurrect it by Dr. Jahi Issa and Brother Reggie Marbury. This is from July 12, 2017 for the Black Agenda Report. We'll post this link here. So check this out. And all this comes from really a lack of understanding history also. You know, and the people's history and culture teaches you how to deal with the problems of the past and the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. Okay, yeah, Rob in New Jersey, Shionika. I like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. I want to see a woman black president, but I think Booker has upped Harris because of what he wants to implement as a president. I'm not sure which polls you're looking at. Both of them in 2 months, I don't think either one of them are still going to be in the race, to tell you the truth. Cory Booker or Kamala Harris. In 2 months, especially after Iowa, I don't think any one of them really going to be in the race. They're not going to be in much longer. But let's see, let's continue here. Okay, everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. How's everybody doing today? So if you're just tuning in, we're discussing this topic. Black student loan debt is crushing Black borrowers as the racial wage gap plays a big part. Experts say how to fix it. Okay, and there are a number of articles I've seen over the past few months that deal with this. And the most recent one was from CBSNews.com from November 15, 2019. Student loan debt weighs heavier on Black borrowers, Fed says. And this was a report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And all this ties into policy. All this ties into laws. This ties into government. This ties into policies from the Department of Education. And we know the Secretary of Education is nominated by the president. Okay. And so Betsy DeVos, what Betsy DeVos is doing in the Department of Education is really hurting African Americans and reversing these policies that the Obama administration had in place that unfortunately many of us didn't know existed. Okay, let's see here. Where are we? All right, let's continue. So they talked about a two-prong approach. Okay, so next we have Crystal Williams. Crystal L. Williams is an assistant professor at the University of Alabama. Assistant professor at the University of Alabama. And she said a holistic approach is needed to address the student debt crisis. A holistic approach is needed to address the student debt crisis. Initiatives that focus on higher education finance should be central to this holistic approach because a substantial percentage of Black students come from low-income families and rely on grants to pay for college. These initiatives should promote increased support for need-based aid, such as the Pell Grant, and emphasize increasing the purchasing power of these awards. Okay, furthermore, these initiatives should include more public support for reputable colleges and universities that educate a substantial percentage of Black students, such as HBCUs, predominantly Black institutions, and community colleges. Ultimately, more institutional support could help to buffer the need for tuition increases and allow institutions to increase allocations to scholarships that help to reduce college financial burden. In addition to supporting institutions that educate Black students, support for equity-focused large-scale college affordability plans could also help to reduce many Black students' debt burden, okay? Equity-focused large-scale college affordability plans. Also, while reputable institutions that serve a substantial percentage of African-American students should receive increased public support, support for for-profit institutions, there's that word again, support for for-profit institutions that employ predatory practices which saddle students with high levels of debt and credentials that have little to no value in the labor force should be eliminated, okay? Support for for-profit institutions that employ predatory practices which saddle students with high levels of debt and credentials that have little to no value in the labor force should be eliminated. African-American students comprise over 1/4 of enrollment at for-profit institutions. I remember just a few years ago, Romeo, the rapper Lil Romeo, who's now Romeo Miller, Master P's son, he was doing commercials promoting for-profit colleges, as well as Steve Harvey. Now, Andre Perry is a fellow in the Metropolitan Policy Program at the Brookings Institution, the Brookings Institute. And Andre Perry said, from bestowing the capacity to move to a better resourced school district to expanding enrichment activities, wealth influences who gets admitted into college and the post-secondary options as a person has, okay? Wealth influences who gets admitted into college and the post-secondary options a person has. To effectively address the Black student debt problem, one must tackle wealth inequalities caused by racism that colleges and universities exacerbate. To effectively address the Black student debt problem, one must tackle wealth inequalities caused by racism that colleges and universities exacerbate. Now, higher education institutions shoulder low wealth families with debt by issuing tuition and room and board vouchers to all students who can demonstrate less wealth than the sticker price of education. Let me repeat that. Higher education institutions shoulder low wealth families with debt by issuing tuition and room and board vouchers to all students who can demonstrate less wealth than the sticker price of education. These should be capped at the price of in-state tuition at all public institutions. In addition, federal work-study policy should enable low-wealth students to earn while they learn through paid internships relevant to a student's major. Now, state coordinating boards can administer new statewide matching systems that pair students to employers with approved positions. Accordingly, states and cities should not give away tax incentives to land employers, to land employers. Okay, so they're saying that states and cities should not give away tax incentives to bring employers in. Okay, like New York was going to give away, I forgot how much money to Amazon to come in. Rather, states must create a tax structure that reestablishes employers' role in training the workforce through this matching intermediary. Or if we just look, the article came out last couple of days, FedEx paid $0 in taxes. They went from like $1 billion in taxes to $0 of taxes, thanks to Donald Trump's $1.4 trillion tax cut, which shifted the benefits to the top 10% or the top 1%, okay, and added almost $1 trillion to the national debt. Okay, this is all dealing with policies. There were a lot of people were expecting the tax refund this past go around, like they normally got, and they didn't get a tax refund. They actually owed money, thanks to Donald Trump's tax cut, okay, for the wealthy. Even though he lied and said it was for the middle class, no, it was to screw the middle class on behalf of the wealthy. Elections have consequences. Some of you all normally get a nice tax refund. You thought you wouldn't get one this time, and not only did you not get a tax refund, you owed money. Okay, did you thank Donald Trump for that? Now, Victoria Jackson, senior policy analyst for higher education at the Education Trust, says solutions to the African-American student debt crisis must not only address the needs of future students, but those with existing debt. To help future generations of Black students complete college without crushing debt, resources must be invested in students who struggle the most to pay and colleges that serve the greatest shares of students of color. What's more important, African-American completion rates can be improved by investing in under-resourced campuses that disproportionately serve low-income students and students of color, so they can provide better institutional supports to help those students graduate ready to step into a successful career, okay? So Black completion rates can be improved by investing in under-resourced campuses that disproportionately serve low-income students and students of color, especially like your community colleges. Now, at the same time, public policy must protect students from predatory institutions that misuse federal and state financial aid or defraud students by providing an education that isn't worth their time and money and may leave them with debt and little to show for it and little chance of paying it back. These are those for-profit institutions. Once again, more than 25% of African Americans attend for-profit institutions because they target us. Now, affordability policies, including doubling the maximum Pell Grant and indexing it to inflation, removing the ban on Pell Grants for incarcerated students. This is dealing with policy once again. Removing the ban on Pell Grants from incarcerated students, increasing state funding for public colleges and need-based aid, and implementing a debt-free college promise up to the cost of attendance for low-income students are likewise needed and long overdue. Likewise needed and long overdue. Debt cancellation will go a long way toward helping African-American borrowers with existing debt, though forgiveness plans should take racial wealth disparities into account and be graduated not only by income, but by household wealth to ensure that the amount forgiven is sufficient to alleviate debt burdens for Black borrowers. Student debt is not only a crisis for African American borrowers, but the whole country. Okay, student loan debt is not only a crisis for African American borrowers, but for the whole country. Racist public policy created it, and we will need bold structural solutions to fix it. Okay, that's Victoria Jackson, Senior Policy Analyst for Higher Education at the Education Trust. Okay, so check out this article from Washington Post, WashingtonPost.com. Student debt is hitting African Americans the hardest. These experts have a plan to fix it. And the themes that we see them talk about, the racial wealth gap, the racial income gap, the racial wage gap, for-profit colleges, okay? And so these are common themes. And what was the other one? Student loan forgiveness as well. These are 4 common themes that we see all these experts mention. Okay, so this article was written by Danielle Douglas Gabrielle. Let me give you the link here to this article. This is from WashingtonPost.com. Okay, let's continue. An African American business owner is supposed to name your business here on the thread of the broadcast. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can start advertising with the African History Network today. Our current promotions get 3 months for the price of 1. That promotion is going on for a few more days. You have a few more spots left. Okay, so we have a new advertiser. So everybody uses toothbrushes. At least I hope you do. And a lot of people don't know that they're toothbrushes made by an African American dentist, right? So millions of plastic toothbrushes are discarded every year, and this is not good news for the environment. The toothbrushes that are produced by OraTrue.com are designed to reduce that waste with a biodegradable bamboo handle and medium bristles that will not hurt your gums. Bamboo itself is a fast-growing grass, so stocks are swiftly replenished. This is a toothbrush created by an African-American dentist named Dr. James Ligon, L-I-G-O-N. Visit their website, OraTrue.com, OraTrue.com for more information and to place your orders today. That's OraTrue.com, OraTrue.com. All right, so I want to get to this other article here that I had as well, and this dealt with this one tied in. This was from CNBC.com. We talked about it a little bit, but there's a lot more here because they tie this into history. The student debt crisis has hit Black students especially hard. Here's how. So this is from July 27, 2019, July 27, 2019, okay? And I like the fact that they tie this into history because all this, ties into history. And let's see here. So they start talking about the student loan debt and the plan from Elizabeth Warren. Okay, and it's, let me post this here in a second. Okay, so it says, when Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren earlier this week unveiled the details of her bill to cancel student debt, she stressed how it would deliver significant financial relief to borrowers of color. Significant financial relief to borrowers of color. She said, the day our bill gets signed into law, that Black-white wealth gap would shrink by 25 points. Under the proposal introduced along with Representative James E. Clyburn, Democrat of South Carolina, borrowers with household incomes under $100,000 would get $50,000 of their student debt forgiven. Borrowers with household incomes under $100,000 would get $50,000 of their student debt forgiven. Higher earners would get a smaller share of their debt voided. Now, African American borrowers do stand to benefit greatly from Senator Warren's bill. That's because by almost every measure, the student debt crisis has hit them especially hard. Now, Jason, I guess it's pronounced Houle, Houle, who's an assistant professor of sociology at Dartmouth College, said the racial wealth gap is both the biggest and has grown the fastest among those with a college education. The racial wealth gap is both the biggest and has grown the fastest among those with a college education, he said. Student loan debt is potentially one thing that explains why that has happened. So nearly 85% of African American bachelor's degree recipients carry student loan debt. Nearly 85% of bachelor's degree recipients carry student loan debt, compared to 69% of white bachelor's degree recipients, according to the Center for Responsible Lending, which is a nonprofit organization in Durham, North Carolina. The average white student loan borrower owes $30,000. The average African-American borrower owns close to $34,000. Now, I've seen some estimates that say $37,000 for the average African-American student loan borrower, as in the report from the Federal Reserve. White borrowers pay down education debt at a rate of 10% a year, compared with 4% for African-American borrowers. Nearly 38% of all African-American students who entered college in 2004 had defaulted on their student loan within 12 years, a rate more than 3 times higher than their white counterparts, according to the Brookings Institute. Now, to understand why debt weighs heavier on African Americans than their white counterparts, you have to look into the past, into history, said Julia Bernard, a student debt expert at the Center for Responsible Lending. She said, quote, "There's structural discrimination. It's a larger civil rights issue. There's structural discrimination. It's a larger civil rights issue." So they talk about the GI Bill, which I've talked about before, because the GI Bill really ties into this history. So the promise of the GI Bill, which offered tuition assistance to Americans who had served in the armed forces, went largely unfulfilled for African Americans, writes Hillary Herbold, Herbold, in an article for the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. The law passed in 1944 didn't discriminate by race, at least in the education benefits provision, but its terms were, quote, interpreted one way for Blacks and another way for whites, Hillary Herbold writes. She tells the story of a Black veteran who already had a bachelor's degree, but sought to use his GI Bill benefits to complete a master's degree. She said, quote, "The Veterans Administration denied the claim, informing him that he needed no further education," end quote. Even for African-American veterans who were offered a tuition assistance by the government, there was the challenge of finding a seat on campus. Fewer historically Black colleges existed back then. And so the GI Bill is signed in 1944. World War II ends in 45. It's signed into law by President Roosevelt. Goes into effect basically 1946, the GI Bill, okay? And the GI Bill is going to change the landscape of higher education and who gets to go to college. The GI Bill changes this. I did a broadcast a few months back dealing with how the GI Bill's promise was denied to 1 million Black World War II veterans. Okay, go check out that broadcast that I did because I go deep into this. And History.com has a really good article dealing with this as well, entitled How the GI Bill's Promise Was Denied to 1 million Black World War II Veterans. We'll come to that article from History.com in just a minute. So even for Black veterans who were offered tuition assistance by the government, there was the challenge of finding a seat on campus. Fewer historically Black colleges existed back then, and other colleges set official or unofficial quotas on how many Black students they would admit. Quote, white institutions in both the North and the South were essentially closed to Blacks in the 1940s. Okay, Hillary Herbold said. White institutions in both the North and the South were essentially closed to African Americans in the 1940s. At the University of Pennsylvania in 1946, for example, just 46 out of the 9,000 students were African American. Now, more African Americans are attending college today than ever before. Nearly 1 in 4 African Americans between the ages of 25 and 29 hold a college degree, up from 1 in 10 in 1968 who held a college degree. As colleges become more diverse, however, they've also become exponentially more expensive. As colleges become more diverse, they have become exponentially more expensive. 1 year at a nonprofit 4-year private college, including tuition, room, and board, currently costs $48,510, compared with $22,240 in the year 2000, according to Mark Kantrowitz, the publisher of SavingForCollege.com. Okay, the publisher for SavingForCollege.com. Now, once again, a strategy to lower that college tuition: go to an in-state institution and stay at home. Go to an in-state institution and stay at home, as opposed to going to an out-of-state institution, paying the out-of-state, because they charge more for out-of-state students than in-state students. Then you're paying for room and board, paying to stay at the dorm, all that stuff. Okay, you can lower costs. There's strategies to lower the cost. State funding for 2- and 4-year public colleges plummeted after the Great Recession, and the cost of attendance has been shifted to families. In 2016, public colleges and universities received about 1.2 times as much revenue from states and localities as from students, compared with 3.2 times as much in 1988. Okay, in 2016, after the recession, public colleges and universities received about 1.2 times as much revenue from states and localities as from students, compared with 3.2 times as much from states and localities as they did 3.2 times as much from states and localities in 1988. Quote, funding has been dropping as the student body has been diversifying, end quote, Hillary Bernard said. Let me say, who is this Bernard? Let's see, who was that? Okay, I forgot who that was. Okay. To cover the high college tabs, students are taking on more debt. Black students have less family wealth to draw on. According to one analysis, the median wealth of white families in 2016 was $171,000, compared to $17,409 for African American families, and so they often need to borrow more. Okay. And then they talk about how African Americans are disproportionately targeted by for-profit colleges, which have come under scrutiny for their high price tags and poor outcomes. More than a quarter of Black students attend 4-year schools that are for-profit colleges, compared with 10% of white students. Okay, then they talk about the incident with they talk about the case with the Art Institute, Sean Joyce, who I told you about with the Art Institute. All right, now if we look at the GI Bill, right? We look quickly here at the GI Bill. The article from History.com, how the GI Bill's promise was denied to 1 million Black World War II veterans. How the GI Bill's promise was denied to 1 million Black World War II veterans. The sweeping bill promised prosperity to veterans, so why didn't Black Americans benefit? Why didn't Black Americans benefit? Okay, let's see here. And on page 2 of this article, they talk about the fear of Black advancement, the fear of Black advancement. So while there were 1.2 million African-American veterans who served in World War II, right? And when lawmakers began drafting the GI Bill in 1944 as World War II was winding down, some Southern Democrats feared that returning Black veterans would use public sympathy for veterans to advocate against Jim Crow laws, okay? To make sure the GI Bill largely benefited white people, the Southern Democrats drew on tactics they had previously used to ensure that the New Deal helped as few Black people as possible. So you're dealing with the Southern segregationist Democrats known as the Dixiecrats. You have the Northern Democrats that are usually more liberal. You had the Southern segregationist Dixiecrats in a lot of these former Confederate states, okay? One of them was John Rankin, who chaired the committee that controlled the GI Bill, okay? He was a Southern segregationist Democrat. During the drafting of the law, the chair of the House Veterans Committee, the House of Representatives Veterans Committee, Mississippi Congressman John Rankin, played hardball and insisted that the program be administered by individual states instead of the federal government. He got his way. Representative John Rankin was known for his virulent racism. He defended segregation, opposed interracial marriage, and even opposed legislation to confine, then deport every person with, he even proposed legislation to confine, then deport every person with Japanese heritage during World War II. When the bill came to a committee vote, he stonewalled in an attempt to gut another provision that entitled all veterans to a $20 a week unemployment compensation for a year. Representative John Rankin of Mississippi knew this would represent a significant gain for African-American Southerners. So he refused to cast a critical proxy vote in protest. The American Legion ended up tracking down the congressman who had left his proxy vote with Representative John Rankin and flying him to Washington to break the deadlock. Now, President Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act into law on June 22nd, 1944. So that's what we call the GI Bill. It's actually called the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, okay? He signed it into law June 22nd, 1944, only weeks after the D-Day offensive, which was June 6, 1944. And you had 155,000 U.S. servicemen that landed in Normandy in France. Almost 2,000 of them were African Americans. One of them was Medgar Evers, who became a civil rights activist. Medgar Evers, he was a World War II veteran. So the GI Bill, or the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, ushered into law sweeping benefits for veterans, including college tuition, low-cost home loans, and unemployment insurance. But they also got loans to start businesses, okay? Now, African-American veterans are largely going to be shut out of this. The GI Bill's effect on Black veterans. From the start, Black veterans had trouble securing the GI Bill's benefits. Some could not access benefits because they had not been given an honorable discharge, and a much larger number of African American veterans were discharged dishonorably than white counterparts. Veterans did not qualify. Veterans who did not qualify could not find facilities that delivered on the bill's promise, the GI Bill's promise. African American veterans in a vocational training program at a segregated high school in Indianapolis were unable to participate in activities related to plumbing, electricity, and printing because adequate equipment was only available to white students. Simple intimidation kept others from enjoying the GI Bill benefits. In 1947, for example, a crowd threw rocks at African American veterans as they moved into a Chicago housing development. Thousands of African American veterans were attacked in the years following World War II, and some were singled out and lynched. Though Representative John Rankin of Mississippi had lost the battle to exclude African American men from the GI Bill, from the VA unemployment insurance, it was doled out inequitably. Men who applied for unemployment benefits were kicked out of the program if any other work was available to them, even work that provided less wages, okay? Southern postmasters were even accused of refusing to deliver the forms that African American veterans needed to fill out to receive their unemployment benefits. So we're just talking about rampant racism. Rampant racism. And racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. African American veterans and civil rights groups protested their treatment, calling for protection like Black involvement in the Veterans Administration and non-discriminatory loans, but the racial disparities in the implementation of the GI Bill had already been set in motion. As the years went on, white veterans flowed into newly created suburbs. As the years went on, white veterans flowed into the newly created suburbs where they began amassing wealth in skilled positions. But Black veterans lacked those options. The majority of skilled jobs were given to white workers. And what's going to happen is you have redlining, which was a decades-old practice of marking maps by race to characterize the more risk-averse sections of the city. So they are marked in red, and the better investments are marked in green. And a lot of the homes that we wanted to buy, they were redlined. They were classified as being high risk investments, so we were not denied the loans. And the redlining process was created by the U.S. government. That was created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which was created in 1933 by the federal government. The redlining process is created in 1934. Okay, so you can read the rest of this. This goes deeper to it. And I did a broadcast dealing with how African Americans were discriminated against outside the 46. This is one of the main policies that has maldistributed wealth, power, and resources, okay, in this country. So at the June 19th, 2019, at the, the hearing on reparations in the House of Representatives, Dr. Julian Malveaux, who's an economist, Dr. Julian Malveaux talked about the GI Bill, okay? And she talked about how devastating it was. And the GI Bill changed the landscape of, higher education in this country, okay? People don't understand the impact that the GI Bill had. From 1944 to about 1970, there was something like $66 billion invested in the GI Bill, okay? and you're going to have a lot of white men who want to go to college because of the GI Bill. They're able to buy homes, get low interest loans to buy homes. They're able to get low interest loans to start businesses. And we're largely locked out of that, even though our taxpayer dollars were paying for all these loans that white people were able to take advantage of. So the original GI Bill ended in July 1956. By that time, nearly 8 million World War II veterans had received education or training, and 4.3 million home loans worth $33 billion had been handed out. 4.3 million home loans. Well, most African American veterans had been left behind. As employment, college attendance, and wealth surged for whites, disparities with their black counterparts not only continued, but widened. There was, writes Katznelson, quote, no greater instrument for widening an already huge racial gap in post-war America than the GI Bill, end quote. Today, a stark wealth gap between black and white Americans persists. The median wealth for white households is about $171,000. For African American households, $17,100, about 1/10 of that as their white counterparts, as I previously stated. The legacy of the GI Bill is still at work, and for African American families, its negative impact could linger for years to come. This all deals with policies. The GI Bill was public policy, okay? Let's see here. Looks like they have an update to this. Okay, so the median, so they look at the median income for white households in 2017 was $68,145, according to the U.S. Census. For African American households, it was $40,258. So it's interesting. See, I printed this article up on June 23rd, 2019. It originally came out June 21st, 2019. So the last paragraph, when I printed it up, they give you what the median household wealth is. They changed it here in the articles. I'm looking at the article live. And even though they say today a stark wealth gap between Black and American families persists, instead of talking about the wealth gap, they talk about the median income for white households in the gap. That's still important, but it's interesting they don't list what the wealth gap is. They talk about median income, because the wealth gap is not as great. The median income gap is not as great as the wealth gap. So median income for white households in 2017 was $68,145, according to the U.S. Census, compared to $40,258 for African American households. So I'm not sure why. I'm about to send them a message. I'm not sure why they took out what the wealth disparity is and put in an income disparity, even though both are important. And then also check out the article, FDR signs GI Bill. FDR signs GI Bill. That's from 1944, June 20th, 1944. FDR signs the GI Bill, June 22nd, 1944. Because in this article, it talks about how over 50 years, the impact of the GI Bill was enormous. The 20 million veterans and dependents using the education benefits, and 14 million home loans guaranteed, for a total federal investment of $67 billion. $67 billion over the course of 50 years. These are taxpayer dollars, and largely African Americans did not benefit from this. All right. Okay, how's everybody doing? Let's see who we have. We got Bernadine, Shionika. Okay, everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. If you are in the market to buy a car, visit Car Marshall, okay? Click on the link below that I'm going to post here, and Car Marshall will help negotiate. Car Marshall will help you find and negotiate buying a new vehicle. They have over 100,000 new and used cars from dealers. Car Marshall, you shop, we negotiate. You shop, we negotiate, okay? And we'll post a link here for Car Marshall. We also have it in the description of this broadcast. African American business owners, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. And we have a new DVD bundle pack of my latest lectures that I've done in 2019. We have it in digital download format and DVD format also. It's Black Migration 1619 to 2019. Black Migration 1619 to 2019. And it includes a presentation I did in February dealing with Black migrations and the Red Summer 1919, the Detroit Race Riot of 1943, but Black migrations is this year's theme for African American History Month, okay? And it's the theme is not just to be studied or commemorated during the month of February, it's to be studied all year long. And we know this is the year of return, the 400-year anniversary of August 20, 1619 in Virginia. But we also know that Africans were being taken into the territory we call South Carolina in 1526 by the Spanish, okay? So I talk about that as well. That was 93 years before Jamestown, Virginia. And then we also know that African people have been in this land going back at least 51,700 years. These are the Khoisan, okay? And the Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They come from Southern Africa. So I deal with all that in that presentation. Also, you get the presentation I did dealing with how Black men used to dominate horse racing. When Black men used to dominate horse racing. And how we were pushed out of horse racing as well. There was a concerted effort to push us out of horse racing. A lot of the early winners of the Kentucky Derby were African-American men. The first Kentucky Derby was ran in 1875. The winner was a 19-year-old African-American man named Oliver Lewis. You get 6 principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African-Americans. And there's 3 other presentations also. Okay, so that's Black Migration 1619 to 2019. So check that out, the 6 DVD bundle pack, or it's also in digital download format as well, okay? All right, so check out all these articles. Look, we have to get out of here. Listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then also follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Also follow us on our YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP, Michael M. Hotep on YouTube. And turn on, subscribe there and turn on the notifications also on YouTube so you know when we go live, okay? All right, so remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now, it's correct your own behavior, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Right now, it's correct your own behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.